Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's track guide. We are here for season 1, 2023 at Rudskogen, week 1. Apologies for abandoning you all the last 2 weeks of last season, but as you can see, my surroundings have changed because I moved. So now that we're settled in, we can get back to the track guides, and the plan is to have 12 track guides, one for each week of this brand new season. Back to Rudskogen. It's a super technical track. It's a free track. We should see a lot of participation this week because it's a free track, but it is a tough one. The off tracks are very, very difficult. Most of the places that you get an off track, you will also get a slowdown. So you really have to be careful with track limits here. It's also a very technical track. The car wants to spin on you in a lot of different places because of all of the elevation change, and the conditions are very, very cold in comparison to what we see normally at almost any other track. So keep that all in mind. That said, let's go ahead and take a look at the lap before we dive in and analyze it corner by corner. Before we get started, let's take a look at our track conditions. We have a 19 degrees Celsius track with 17-degree air temperature and moderate usage at 43%. We also do have a rules tab this week that outlines where the off tracks and slowdowns are around Rudskogen. I highly suggest that you go through and look at this because almost every place that you go off track around here, there is a slowdown. The other thing I will say is that in general, staying in contact with the red and white curbing is the safe bet, but there are some places where there is no red and white curbing, and in that case, it is the white line on the track. So just keep that in mind that there are a lot of slowdowns around here that can ruin your qualifying lap as well as your race if you do get one of them. As for our laps, we did a bunch of laps here. This is all one tank of fuel. Most of the laps were in the 118s. We got some 117s, some mess ups here with 123s and 124s, but we will actually look at this 117.836. It is our fastest lap. It is also a very clean and precise lap for the most part, so it should be really easy to cover. But anyway, let's go ahead and start that lap and analyze it corner by corner. The lap starts off with one of the trickiest turns we have to deal with this week at turn 1. At the apex, there's a slight elevation change that wants to unsettle the car, and the exit leads directly into turn 2, so we don't have much space to work with there either. The bump at the apex of turn 1 is the first thing that's going to limit our speed here. It feels like you should be able to go through turn 1 faster than you really can, but we need to make sure that the car is well within our control as we hit that bump. If the car is sliding or if we're on the brakes too much to correct for braking too late as we get to the apex, it can easily cause us to lose control of the car. The other limiting factor here is the exit of turn 1 is turn 2. If we run too deep through turn 1 or have to make any corrections on exit, we run the risk of cutting turn 2, and there is a huge slowdown penalty there. We also risk compromising turn 2, which exits onto a very fast downhill section, so we need to consider turn 2 while heading through turn 1 as both corners are very much connected. With this in mind, we really want to focus on having the car in complete control as we come through the apex of turn 1 and transition to the exit where we meet turn 2. So, slowing the car a little bit more than we feel like we want to is a good starting point. We can start braking right around the beginning of the entry curbing, and we're looking to complete our braking just before we get to the apex. By finishing braking before the apex, we can reduce the weight on the front of the car, which can help us handle the bump a little bit better. We're also looking to ease back onto the throttle as we get to the apex to further lift the front of the car to help handle the bump as well and start pushing us through the corner. We're aiming to use as much of the apex curbing as we can, but there is a slowdown here, so it's important not to use too much. In general, you want to keep at least one wheel in contact with the white lines. As we come over the bump and the car settles, we want to immediately turn our attention to the turn 2 apex curbing as our next focus point as we look to instantly start the transition from turn 1 to turn 2. As mentioned, turn 2 is almost a continuation of turn 1, so everything really starts back there. That said, if we've come through turn 1 in control of our car, then turn 2 is largely just a patience game. As we start to get to the turn 2 apex curbing, we're aiming to hold a tight line early on in the corner to reduce the distance traveled. Turn 2 is also a widening radius corner, so we're more focused on being able to get a good exit than we are with early corner speed. We want to hug the apex curbing and use every bit of it that we can. As we continue to ride the curbing, we want to keep our eyes as far up the track as possible as we aim to spot our exit and we wait to commit back to throttle. As we come to the end of the apex curbing and the darker barrier comes into view on the far side of the track, we can start to commit back to throttle and run the car out to the exit curbing. It can be tempting to try to get on throttle too early in turn 2, but the car will want to push wide and will end up losing a lot of time to tire scrub and by traveling a larger distance. The other risk is running outside of the track bounds here on the left side does also produce a slowdown penalty. Once again, turn 2 is all about patience. We want to let the car settle into the apex and wait to commit to throttle until we know we're set up for a nice, smooth, and speedy exit as we head back down the hill towards turn 3. Turn 3 is a fast downhill corner that comes at the end of a long straight and leads directly into the following corner. Because we're coming off of a fast part of the track and don't have time to accelerate on exit, we're looking to go fast in and slow out. We can use the exit of turn 3 and entry of turn 4 to continue to slow the car, so we're looking to maximize our entry speed by braking much later than normal. One difficulty we have to consider is that the turn is slightly off camber, meaning the outside of the track grades away from the apex, so we have a little bit less grip than expected. As the car rotates through the corner and we transition to the next one, we need to be very careful not to lose traction at the rear. If the rear starts to slip, you'll want to catch it as early as possible or risk overheating the rear tires and spinning. Running wide off track will also give us a slowdown, so we have a difficult balancing act of coming in with speed and slowing the car in a very controlled manner. We'll use all of the track that we can on entry and turn in, aiming to cross over the end of the white line in the middle of the road on the way to our apex. We also use that line in the road as a good braking reference to ease onto the brakes and start to slow the car through the corner in a controlled manner. In this early phase of the corner, we want to have minimal wheel input as the weight of the car transitions to the nose under braking. Any large wheel movements run the risk of unsettling the rear and causing a spin later on. As we head through the corner, we want to trail off the brakes and add a bit more steering input as we transition from the exit of turn 3 to the entry of turn 4. As we come into the entry of turn 4, our goal is to continue our trail braking and to slow the car and focus on keeping it as stable as we can as we rotate towards the apex of turn 4. We're already entering the turn slowly, so we're now flipping our target from turn 3 and looking to go slow in and fast out instead. We want to be as patient as we can as the car continues to slow and rotate to ensure that we make it to the apex. Being too eager to get back on throttle will cause us to push wide and compromise our run uphill and through the S's. We want to keep our eyes looking at that apex, and as soon as the car is pointed towards the apex curbing, we can aggressively commit back to throttle. As we come through the apex, we want to continue our arc through the corner as we look to move quickly back over to the right-hand side of the track to open up for turn 5 as much as we can as we enter the S's. Turn 5 is a quick transition from the exit of turn 4, so how well we take turn 4 really dictates how well we can enter turn 5. We're also starting a quick S's section that connects to one another, so we have to continue to consider the next corner in our approach. As we get to the beginning of the entry curving on the right, we can start our turn in, and while we could easily take turn 5 flat out, we'd have a hard time making the transition to turn 6 if we did. Because of that, we need a quick lift off the throttle as we approach the apex to help the car rotate a bit more, and we're looking to use as much of the apex curbing as we can while avoiding the off track or a slowdown. As soon as we get to the apex, we want to immediately shift our eyes up the track towards turn 6 so we can start to prepare for that transition. As we come off the turn 5 apex curbing and the car settles, we want to immediately start our direction change towards turn 6. For turn 6, we're once again set up by our exit of the previous turn, but if we are able to open up for turn 6 properly while exiting turn 5, we can follow a very similar formula. As soon as we come off the turn 5 apex curbing, we want to start turning in for turn 6, and we're aiming to once again cut the corner as much as we can while still avoiding an off track or a slowdown. In this case, as long as we still have wheels within the white lines, we are okay. Just like turn 5, we need a slight lift as we approach the apex to allow the car to rotate a little bit more so that we can open up on exit for the transition to turn 7. We're also using the end of the curbing here as our marker to start our transition to turn 7, just like we did going from turn 5 to turn 6. As mentioned before, the turns through this S's section are all connected to one another, so we always have to think about the next corner up ahead if we want this section as a whole to come together nicely. Turn 7 is the final one of the S's, but we still need to think about the transition to the next turn because there's almost no time in between the exit here and the entry of turn 8, which is somewhat of a theme at Rudskogen. With turn 8 in our minds, our goal here is to hold a tight line on exit to allow for a nice smooth transition. As we come off of the turn 6 apex curbing, we want to immediately start our direction change towards turn 7, and we're once again aiming to cut as much of the corner as the track limits will allow at the apex. The difference now is that as soon as the car is pointed towards the apex of turn 7, we want to immediately start braking to slow the car down enough so that we can hold a tight line through the exit that we're aiming for. We want to trail off the brakes as we come through the apex and start cresting the hill to keep the car balanced, and we're looking to settle the car on exit as soon as we can so we can hold a nice tight line heading into the entry of turn 8. Turn 8 comes right off the exit of turn 7, so once again, thinking about turn 8 when approaching turn 7 is important. As we exit turn 7, we want to hold our arc as the car settles and begins to rotate towards the turn 8 apex. Our main goal here is to stay patient with throttle as much as we can as we head through the apex and search for a good exit. From around the middle of the turn, we're dealing with a downhill drop that can easily unsettle the rear of the car, so we're mainly using throttle to keep the car balanced through this phase. If we get to full throttle too early here, we'll start to understeer and push wide because our momentum and the drop from the hill will prevent us from being able to hold a tight line. This in turn would compromise our exit and our run back down the hill. As the car comes to the bottom of that hill, we can commit aggressively back to throttle and head straight for the turn 9 apex, which will essentially just act as our exit curbing for turn 8 because turn 9 isn't much more than a kink, no shame. As we come down the hill for turn 10, we have to keep in mind that gravity is working against us under braking. The corner is also a tight one that exits uphill, so gravity is once again working against us on exit. Because we're braking limited and we're fighting gravity on the way out of the corner, we want to prioritize the exit, so we're searching for a slightly later apex to help us climb back up the hill as efficiently as possible. Fortunately for us, the apex curbing is also positioned in a way that leads us to that later apex. We can start to brake right after we pass the red and white barrier on the left, and we're looking for hard braking before we start trailing off as we turn in for the corner. Note that if you're locking the front tires or understeering here, it's very likely that you're turning in with too much braking force still applied. If that's the case, try to brake a little bit earlier and a little bit lighter to avoid that locking and understeer. As we come to the bottom of the hill, we can start turning in, and as soon as we start to get to the apex curbing, we can gently start to commit back to throttle. We just need to be careful not to floor it too early, or we're going to push wide on exit. As we come to the exit curbing, we're looking to get the car straightened up as we look to hug the left side of the track approaching turn 11. Turn 11 is the kink at the top of the hill, and while it's easily flat out, it's important to note that this does guide us directly into the entry of turn 12. Essentially, we want to follow the curvature of the corner to roughly its center and then straighten up as we get there to shoot straight for the turn 12 entry curbing. Turn 12 is another one where it feels like we should be able to take it faster than we really can, but the track does drop slightly downhill, so if we come in too hot, it's very easy to run wide. That said, we want to carry as much momentum as we can through the corner, so our approach here is to be light on our inputs to do that. As we get to the entry curbing, we want to start turning in for the apex and brake slightly to help guide the car towards the apex curbing. Once again, we want to be patient on throttle and really wait for the car to settle in before we get back on throttle, so it's okay to coast a little bit here as we head towards the apex. As we arrive at the apex, we can start to ease back on throttle, but we're once again trying to avoid being too aggressive so we don't run wide on exit. You can see on this lap, I got back on full throttle a little bit too quickly, so I did have to partially lift, which ultimately cost us a little bit of time. On the exit, you can use all of the red and white curbing as long as you don't touch the grass at the end of it. Turn 13 is easily flat out, but it leads directly into turn 14, so we do have to be careful with making sure the car is ready for braking pretty soon after the apex. We want to use as much of the apex curbing as we can, but there is a slowdown here, so you can't take too much of it. As soon as we come through the apex, we want to straighten up the car and aim for the inside of turn 14 to prepare for braking. Turn 14 is a very long corner that takes us over 180 degrees. I've explored a few lines here, including running a bit deeper on entry to apex later, but the problem is there is so much corner that the apex is a little bit too late for us to really take advantage of it. Because of that, I found that holding a tighter line through the turn has been the best approach for me. As we start to get close to the white line on the inside, we can start braking, and our goal here is to keep the rear of the car in control as we guide the car into a tight apex. As the car begins to settle, we can start to get back to partial throttle through the middle part of the corner as we continue to hold our tight line. Like other turns, being impatient on throttle application can push us wide on exit and ultimately cost us more time by having to make corrections on exit, so we want to be patient here. We should keep our eyes as far ahead as we can, and as soon as we can see the end of the curve and the beginning of the main straight, we can commit back to throttle aggressively as we look to use all of the curbing on exit as we speed down the start finish straight to complete our lap here at Rudskogen. All right, and finally, I just want to give a huge shout out to anyone who liked, subscribed, commented, come and hung out on Twitch. That is twitch.tv El Gato con la Pipa. There is a link in the description below. There's also a link to the lap on Garage 61 in the description below, as well as a link to my Discord in case you were interested in chatting with me about anything you see here or getting advice on this, other things, or just wanting to hang out. Um, One other thing I do want to plug this week is that we do have an F4 racing league called the Alt F4 Racing League. We race Thursday nights. The session opens at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time, with a 1 hour practice, qualifying, and then the race to follow. So you do have until 6 p.m. Pacific or 9 p.m. Eastern to get in there and enjoy the race. If you're interested in joining that league, you can come chat me up in my Discord, or I will leave a link to the Alt F4 Discord as well. If you want to join through that, there is information on how to join that league through there. But I personally would love to see you out on track racing with us. We are looking to get those grid sizes up, hopefully into the 30s. But yeah, we're entering our third season. It's gone well, yeah, and we're looking to expand a little bit now. Also, if you are looking for sim equipment, you should absolutely check out Muradness.com if you've never heard of it or never seen it. I do have a promo code for Muradness.com that you can find in the description below, but especially for sim racing gloves, they are the sim racing gloves that I use. There's a bunch of other great gear over there, and you are supporting a small sim industry business that Daniel's running over there. So, really great stuff. But anyway, yeah, until next time, I do hope you enjoy your races this week. Good luck out there. Good luck keeping it on track and avoiding the off tracks. And until Long Beach next week, take care of yourselves.